Euphrasie Barbier, Chapter 10, 1876, Outward Bound. Mother Augustine and Mother Jude were returning to Europe with Euphrasie. On the 2nd of June, they were all to board the Australia at Napier, bound for San Francisco. Their last precious days in New Zealand were spent peacefully in the sisters' company. The Napier sisters were working busily for a bazaar to raise money for the travellers' expenses. Community and visitors together spent hours sitting working at the goods for sale. Euphrasie's hands were as busy as any while she listened and talked. She was a particularly gifted needlewoman, quick, efficient, and very creative. She made time, too, for a final cosy private talk with each sister. When at last came the day of parting, Napier was in the grip of a howling winter gale, and no ship could approach the jetty. The Australia was straining at anchor far out in the harbour. Passengers had to hire small boats to take them out to the vessel. Euphrasie tried to ignore the heaving sea. There was no way out of this ghastly situation. The ship was half a mile offshore, but it took the sisters 3 hours of misery to reach their goal. And this was within a harbour. It seemed ridiculous, but was horribly real. The big steamer was rolling so badly that the sailors insisted that each passenger be fastened to a rope before attempting to board by ladder. The trip from Napier to San Francisco took exactly a month. It was no pleasure cruise, but to everyone's surprise, the sea was not once as rough as Napier Harbour had been on that first day of the voyage. At San Francisco, the sisters had a few days' rest to prepare them for the 10-day train trip across America. They were in San Francisco on 4th of July, and for the first time they saw something of the Americans' enthusiasm for their national holiday. This year was the centenary of American independence, and the celebrations were particularly lavish. It was all very interesting, but the sisters found it exhausting, particularly at nights. It seemed that every citizen of San Francisco was in the street all night, shouting, singing, dancing, and letting off fireworks. It was also the height of a very hot summer, and the sisters found the constant heat of day and night very tiring. 2 days later, the Sisters of Mercy, with whom they had stayed, saw them off at the railway station. The heat was intense. "At least we will be moving, Mother," said Mother Augustine cheerfully, "and the breeze will be cooler." They settled down for the long trip, first opening the window beside them as far as it would go. Their neighbours, too, were looking for fresh air, but it was a vain hope. As the train left the ripe green summer of California and passed through the high desert country of the Rocky Mountains, the heat became even worse. Every breeze brought in gusts of dry air, heated by the blazing sun, reflected off rocks and bare sand. Euphrasie lay back in her seat, her face flushed and beaded with sweat. "Are you all right, Reverend Mother?" asked Mother Jude, noticing her little cough. "It's just the dust, I think," said Euphrasie. She closed her eyes and tried to sleep. As hours went by, the cough became more frequent and more painful, and Euphrasie could hardly speak for wheezing. She was undoubtedly feverish and quite ill. Mother Augustine hurried down to the refreshment car and came back with a flask of iced water. "This will help you, Mother," she said, encouraging Euphrasie to sip a little, while she wiped her face with a cool, damp towel. Suddenly, Euphrasie had a severe asthmatic attack and seemed to be fighting for her life. A kindly woman in the neighbouring seat tried to help. "You must get her to a doctor as soon as possible," she said. "The next stop is only a tiny settlement, but Laramie is not far away. Laramie is a nice little town. There would surely be a doctor there, perhaps even a hospital." The sisters had never heard of Laramie. All the towns along the Western Line had seemed to be very small and primitive. The conductor, who had been bustling up and down the aisle in his anxiety to help, now hurried to Mother Jude. "A telegram for you, ma'am," he said. "From Laramie. It came in at the last stop." The sisters were mystified. The telegram was addressed simply to the sisters. "It can't be for us. We know no one in this part of the world," said Mother Augustine. "To the sisters, it says," argued the conductor. "You're the only sisters on the train. It must be for you." They opened the telegram. The message was brief. "Beds ready, welcome." It was from the Sisters of Mercy at Laramie. "Oh, thank God! Thank God for sending us help," cried Mother Jude. "But who told the sisters we were coming?" They left the train at Laramie and took a cab to the convent. When the Sisters of Mercy opened their door, expecting to greet old friends, they were amazed to find strangers on the doorstep. They were even more astonished to hear the fate of their telegram, but they welcomed the visitors with open arms. They were alarmed, though, when they saw Euphrasie's condition. "Let's get her into bed immediately," they said. "We'll send at once for our doctor." That gentleman was very concerned. "Pneumonia, of course," he said, "and a very bad case at that." He gave some instructions for treatment. "We can only do our best," he said as he was leaving. "I don't hold out much hope for her. She is old and frail, and the infection has been neglected. Obviously, she has had a severe chill as well." Mother Augustine wept bitterly. "It's my fault. I've killed her. I should never have given her that iced water when she was so ill. I didn't realize. It's my fault. How will our sisters ever forgive me?" The Sisters of Mercy comforted her. "Now off to bed yourself," they insisted. "We'll watch over her for you, and we'll call you at once if there's any change for the worse." No, I don't need a night nurse," Euphrasie wheezed. "Please go to bed, all of you." The sisters turned the lamp low and tiptoed out of the room, leaving the door ajar. The Mercy sisters sent the travellers to bed, and then settled themselves down in the kitchen for the night, stoking up the fire and settling the kettle to boil. That night Euphrasie was too ill even to wonder how it was that someone came in with steam and comforting remedies every time she moaned and struggled to cough up the painful fluid from her lungs. By morning she was too ill to know day from night. She seemed to recognize no one. The doctor came again and again, but for several days her fever and distress grew steadily worse. After one particularly bad bout, she seemed to breathe more easily and dropped into a quiet sleep. "She's out of danger, thank God," they rejoiced together. Mother Augustine wept with relief. "But you must stay here until she can travel safely," insisted the Sisters of Mercy. "When the doctor is happy for her to continue her journey, you must travel by easy stages. We Mercies are spread right across the states. Our sisters will give you a home whenever you want to stop and rest." They were as good as their word. As the journey continued, at each stop the travellers were made welcome at a convent of mercy for a night, 2 nights, a week. Within a few weeks Euphrasie was travelling well and seemed to be her old lively self. At Cleveland, late one evening, they had to change trains. Mother Jude and Mother Augustine hauled the luggage down onto the platform and turned to help Euphrasie down the steep steps. Suddenly the train whistled and jolted, and Euphrasie seized the handhold to steady herself as the train moved. As she clung on at the top of the steps, the train gathered speed. "Stop! Stop! Stop the train!" called Mother Augustine. Mother Jude ran along the platform to find a railway attendant. By the time she had gasped out her story, the thin black tail of the train was disappearing into the greater darkness far ahead. The sisters were distraught. Don't worry, the porter tried to calm them. "She won't go far. If she's got any sense, she'll ring the alarm, and they'll let her off at the other end of town, and she'll be able to walk back. Just stay here and wait for her." There was nothing else they could do. Mother Augustine and Mother Jude paced up and down the station platform, their eyes fixed on the network of converging lines disappearing into the darkness. This was a big railway junction, and from time to time engines appeared out of the black distance, their lights glowing as they shunted backwards and forwards in the darkness. An hour rolled by, and then another, as they waited, their eyes helplessly following each engine that appeared. They sat down on a wooden seat to say another rosary, and they paced up and down again. Suddenly Mother Augustine gripped her companion. "Look, look!" she cried, pointing. Far away in the approaching light of another engine, a tiny black figure stepped off a railway line and stood waiting for the train to pass. Leaving their luggage on the deserted platform, the 2 sisters scrambled down the rough embankment and hurried along the track between the rails. Euphrasie saw them from a distance and waved. When they met her, she was in good spirits. "I walked quietly and slowly," she said. "I was being careful, and some railway men directed me. I was praying and hoping that you would not be too worried." Immensely relieved and thankful, they picked up their luggage and turned into the station. "Sorry, ma'am, we're all locked up for the night," said the watchman. "No more passenger trains until morning. You'll have to get accommodation in the town." They walked out onto the street. They knew nothing of this town. It was past midnight, and the streets were deserted. There was not a cab in sight. As they began to trudge towards a cluster of lights far ahead, presuming that to be the centre of town, a small vehicle turned a corner and came clip-clopping along the street towards them. Mother Jude stepped out to hail it. The carriage stopped, but the lady and gentleman inside were obviously very nervous at being accosted by strangers on the lonely street. When the sisters told their story, they were cautiously sympathetic. "There are some sisters of St. Joseph nearby," the gentleman said. "We could take you to them." He helped the sisters aboard and let them down again at the gate of the convent. He rang the doorbell hastily and hurried away to his carriage. It was long past midnight when the Sisters of St. Joseph were startled by that disturbance at their front door. At first they were suspicious of these midnight callers and questioned them through the barred door. Once convinced of their genuineness, they flung the door open and gave them a warm welcome. They clucked sympathetically over the visitors' misfortunes. "Missed your train? And nothing to eat since midday? You must have a hot supper right now," they insisted. "And while you are having your supper, we'll make up your beds." It was not until next morning, when the mission sisters saw the little convent in the daylight, that they realized the extent of their host's kindness. While one sister had been serving the visitors with a meal, the others had hurriedly stripped and remade their own beds for the guests, and had themselves slept on the floor for the rest of the night. Euphrasie never forgot this wonderful example of hospitality. "Like the poor widow in the Gospel," she would say, "they gave not what they could spare, but all that they had." The Sisters of St. Joseph insisted that the visitors stay all day and rest. "There is a train for New York tonight," they said. "You will be there by tomorrow evening. In the meantime, you must meet our chaplain. He is French and would love to talk with you." It was a pleasant day. The chaplain was delighted with the visitors, and shared recent news from Europe with them. He gave them French papers to read, and they talked of people and places they all knew. He analysed France's new political problems, and earnestly wished the mission sisters a happy future in their homeland. The visitors saw all around the convent and the school. They saw the studio where one of the sisters painted and taught fine arts. Later that day, Mother Jude crept back quietly to have a private word with the artist. "If I send you a small photograph of Mother Mary, will you do a portrait of her for our sisters in New Zealand?" she asked. "There is no way I could persuade her to sit for a portrait, but the sisters would dearly love a good likeness of her." The artist agreed readily. For the rest of the visit she took every opportunity to watch Euphrasie discreetly, noting details of her features, her colouring, and her expressions. The travellers reached New York safely the next day, and again stayed with the Sisters of Mercy. On the 12th of August they boarded the Germanic, a large, ultra-modern passenger steamer newly built for the busy transatlantic run. They had never been on a ship like it. "It's like a floating mansion," they exclaimed. "It's a palace. It is too good for us. If our second-class cabin is as beautiful as this, just imagine what the staterooms of the wealthy tourists must be like." Even more importantly, the Germanic had been specially designed for stability, and the new design was as effective as the builders had claimed. The sea was quite rough, but even Euphrasie felt no discomfort. The beautiful vessel rode through the grey seas with hardly a tremor. While the other passengers promenaded on the decks or played sports, the three sisters sat or walked, quietly enjoying the beautiful sea and sky, and thanking God for the peaceful rest of these few days.